Hi, and welcome to another SAP CodeTalk. I'm back again, Ian Thain from the SAP Developer Advocacy team, and it's my pleasure to do a one-on-one with another colleague, DJ Adams. Some of you may know him. Thank you, DJ, for joining me.
Well, thanks so much for having me again, Ian. I think we've chatted on CodeTalk at least a couple of times before. We had different topics.
I think I shared a picture or a video with you, and we look like young boys. We look like
Young boys.
very young. So yeah, okay. This is a sort of a slightly different one to what some of you may have seen already on the new CodeTalk. But I wanted to grab DJ because, especially if you're one of the attendees of Hands-on SAP Dev, you'll see that DJ transmits, speaks to the metaverse from this location that you're seeing now, and it is a narrowboat. So, first question, DJ, for those that are not initiated, what is a narrowboat? How long have you been on a narrowboat? And where are you in the world right now?
Where in the world? Well, in terms of what a narrowboat is, the key word is sort of in the name, right? It's a boat that's narrow. Okay, it sounds crazy, but that's what it is. Technically speaking, a narrowboat has a narrow beam. A beam being the term for the widest point of a boat or a ship, right? And a narrowboat has a beam of between 6'10" and 7 inches, so quite narrow. So I can touch either wall, port, starboard, cabin walls if I stretch my arms out. By the way, all the measurements that one speaks about in narrowboating and canal context are actually in old-fashioned terms. I mean, distance even. When you're calculating canal routes, distance is measured in miles and furlongs. It's crazy good. By the way, with narrowboats then, folks might have also heard of wide beam boats, which of course then makes more sense now that we have a context of what a narrow beam is. A wide beam is basically a boat that's wider than 7 foot. Sometimes they're 10 foot wide, 12 foot wide. Now, both wide and narrow beam canal boats are flat bottomed and typically between, 40, maybe 45 and 70 feet long. And they're designed to be used on the canal systems in the UK. Now, the restriction on the width, why they're so narrow, it does come from the width of the canals, but it also comes more critically, from the locks, the widths of the locks. Many wide beam canal boats can't pass through certain locks on certain stretches of certain canals. And also, of course, in the locks, that's where a length restriction is as well, between the top and bottom gates. Now, my narrowboat is 6'10" wide and 57 feet long. Which means I can actually use any lock on the network, which means I can go anywhere on the canal network. I launched last year, so I've been living and working from the narrowboat since, late spring. And I'm currently on a stretch of the Leeds and Liverpool canal, somewhere between Ormskirk and Liverpool.
Okay. I'm certain that you have made notes of the whole of the journey from the boat, from its conception all the way through to its launch on your blog. So we'll put that in we'll make sure that we link to that below. Interesting. I mean, it's really interesting the fact that you're saying about this, because it is a real different mindset, and I'm going to get through to it. But let's talk about technology, because we love technology. A narrowboat, you're moving around, so you are home office based. You have been in a building in the past. You're now on the narrowboat. So what does that mean for a narrowboat? Being mobile, but also needing that connectivity that we're speaking through now.
Well, I mean, maybe we'll come to connectivity shortly, because there's a lot to say about that. But I mean, in terms of the difference between being, a building based in a narrowboat from a home office perspective, there's really no difference. I've got my desk area here on the narrowboat. It's a dedicated desk area with all my equipment and live streaming stuff like lights and microphone and so on. And I work from there. All my normal developer advocate duties I do from here, and I also broadcast my live streams from here, as you mentioned before. I guess the only difference is when I have to travel for work. I have to travel and deliver code jams, just like all of my other colleagues. or attend or speak at an event, for example. And when I do that, I like to make sure my narrowboat is safe. I could just moor it up on the canal side and then go off to the airport or whatever. But I prefer to keep it in marina while I'm away.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose the only difference is I've got to plan ahead a little bit more, work out a short stay in a marina. That means, finding a marina, calling them up. Is there a space for a week or so or a few days? And then also, I suppose most importantly, working out the route from where I am to where that is and, how long it's going to take me to get there. Because, of course, narrowboats don't travel very fast. In fact, speed of a narrowboat, on average 4 miles an hour. So, walking pace, more or less. And as a single-hander, on my own, going through locks and other mechanisms like swing bridges, for example, can take, anywhere between 15 minutes and half an hour. You have to operate them yourself. So you really got to think about, your journey and, the obstacles, as it were, from between A and B.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to sort of dwell too long on the one subject, but you'll know when I talk about it in a second. But you have to be that one step ahead. I mean, obviously, heating, water, where the water goes after it leaves you. So let's not dwell on that. Shopping, getting stuff delivered to you, as we were chatting just before the CodeTalk. You've got to be that 1, 2, 3 steps ahead, I guess.
Exactly. It's about planning, basically, and also it's about thinking of being more mindful, and it sort of makes you more mindful of your consumption of stuff: gas, coal, wood, water, and also, like you say, how to get rid of stuff, like let's call it the bathroom, outputs, and also, like you say, deliveries, or finding the local supermarket. I've got a bicycle. And so on, and of course, there's also deliveries. So yeah, it's just about thinking about things a little bit harder.
Okay, and I know because when you were in a building beforehand, you were thinking about connectivity. You mentioned we'll get back to it. So come on, tell us. This is fantastic. What we're going through now, we're doing a Zoom hangout, the two of us. Not the Zoom, sorry, we're doing a Teams hangout. We used to do that. We do Teams hangouts now. What about the connectivity? Tell me about that. You obviously researched it.
Yeah, I mean, I did research it, and I actually used this exact setup that I have on the narrowboat in the cottage I rented while the narrowboat was being built and fitted out, and sort of soak tested it, as it were. But anyway, I've got a data plan, with a mobile phone provider, with a cell phone provider here in the UK. It's an all-you-can-eat plan, which means I don't have to worry about consumption, and the coverage from this provider around the country is pretty decent, and that is a consideration given that as well as the canals snaking through towns and cities, it winds through beautiful countryside as well, desolate countryside where there are fewer cell towers. So that's a consideration. Now, for my gateway, as in the device that sits between my local area network here on the narrowboat, and I've actually got Cat5 in all the different compartments in the cabin, but I've also got Wi-Fi as well. So I have a device that sits between my local area network and the wide area network of the internet, and that's just a router, but it's a 4G router rather than a router that you would plug a fiber or an ADSL cable into, right? So it's pretty simple, and it's very, very similar. But the killer component I've got is an external antenna. So it's an external antenna that sits on the roof of the narrowboat. It's about this size, size of a sort of hardback book, and it boosts the signal, the 4G and 5G signal. So it supports the 5G frequencies as well. The router itself is only 4G because 5G routers are crazy expensive still, but 4G speeds are great. I can get upload and download speeds in the tens of megabits per second. So it's great, and it works really well, as you can see right now on this chat, but also the live streams. But I actually wrote a blog post. You mentioned my blog before. I wrote a blog post specifically on my, how I get my internet connectivity. So folks can find the link to that post in the description of this episode, I guess, as well. So yeah, there's lots more to read about, how I get my internet.
Definitely. Okay. Well, we mentioned obviously the transition and the things that steps ahead, but is there anything that you haven't been able to do? You think, oh, okay, didn't think of that, or yeah, I knew it was going to happen, but it's a little bit more awkward than usual.
Not really. I mean, it's I suppose when I think about this, the answer is surprisingly not really. My life is relatively simple and always has been. I don't have great needs, great desires for things, for stuff, to whatever. Or put another way, I'm quite boring, and therefore the transition from land-based to a canal-based life has been fairly straightforward. Like I mentioned, I think the only thing I can think of is I can't suddenly think, okay, I'm going to take off and go on holiday for a few days here, there, or everywhere, and just leave the canal boat. You just lock your house up and off to the airport or to the train station. Here, it's a little bit more planning, but I've mentioned that already. So, but that's really it. So in fact, I'm in a marina right now. So I arrived here a couple of days ago because I've got a couple of co-jams I'm delivering in the Frankfurt area next week. So, it's always nice to get into the marina a few days before so you can sort of, sort yourself out and everything. So yeah, that really is the only difference.
And one quick weird question. I don't know if it's weird or not. When you go into a marina, is there some sort of like camaraderie that happens?
Oh my goodness, yes, yeah. I mean, first of all, I think canal life is generally slower and more relaxed. So people are generally, I suppose this is a huge generalization on my part, but there we go. People seem to be a little bit more relaxed and laid back about things, less stressed. I'm not saying that narrowboat life is stress-free. It's not at all. But the family feel that you get from your narrowboat neighbours is incredible, and everybody helps each other. Just the other day, I was coming in to this marina and it was super windy, and the wind catches the side of the narrowboat and just blows you on course. So Stu on the narrowboat mooring next to one to where I'm moored now, he came out and I managed to throw him a rope and he pulled me in and everything. That's just one tiny example of everybody helps each other.
Yeah, I mean the reason why I ask that is because obviously life changes. Years ago when I was a young boy, and probably when you were a young boy, DJ, because we're very similar ages, you'd know the people around you in your community. Yeah. Whereas now, I'm lucky I know my neighbours, but you speak to some people sometimes, especially maybe this is a generalisation for the UK. I don't know, but some people don't even know the people who live next door but one to them. It's just weird. But yeah, it seems that this narrowboat, with the history, of where it came from, it's still very much a friendly way of life, which is good.
That's right.
So you said where roughly you are, and you said about the events you're doing. So what's next for location and for DJ going forward?
Well, I mean, when I'm back from this trip next week, where I'm in Germany, I'll be coming back to the boat. I'll be leaving the marina and heading back east along this section of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal towards Bursker Bridge, which is where there's a branch of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal going north. It's called the Rufford branch. I'm going to go up to Rufford and further on to Tarleton, up towards Preston. And then after that, I'm going to be heading down sort of south in the UK. So my intention is to get onto the Shropshire Union Canal, and then maybe I'll also go down the Llangollen Canal, and of course over the very famous Pond Facility Aqueduct. But in terms of scale, just to give you an idea of scale, in order to get to the Shropshire Union, I've got to go back down the Lee branch of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, all the way along the Bridgewater Canal, onto the Trent and Mersey, down a little bit, and then onto the Middlewich branch of the Shropshire Union Canal, and then onto the Shropshire Union Canal itself. So my aim is to get there by midsummer this year. That's the scale of things. That's how slow, one travels. Everything moves at a different pace on the canal.
Well, we wish you bon voyage. DJ Adams, Pirate Coder. I said, when I invited you to this call, I said Pirate Coder. Ahoy there, advocates. So, ahoy there. But thank you so much, DJ, for for sharing some of your tales. Because again, I said we will link with DJ's blog so you can find out a little bit more about the boat. Do you want to tell people the name of the boat, by the way, before we finish?
Oh, yes. So the boat is named Fully Restful. Now, that has an obvious meaning that most people on the canal towpath understand, of course. But it also has a very technical meaning, which hopefully some of our listeners will grok. We don't need to explain that here, but put in the comments maybe to the podcast or to the YouTube video version of this where you think the name Fully Restful comes from.
Definitely. DJ, thank you so much for joining me on Code Talk.
Thanks for having me.